Wait a second, hold on. Walker Zimmerman has launched his own podcast called The Locker Room. Dan, do you have a podcast?
Nah.
Hello, once again, and welcome to episode 11 of Third Degree, the podcast. Hi, I'm Peter, and joining us today, the normal trio of most excellent human beings, all the way from someplace I don't actually know, is Dan Crook. Not Crooky, but Crook with an E. Hello, Dan. Come in, Dan.
Hello, I'm not currently coming to you from Luton, Bedfordshire.
How excited about promotion are you for Luton Town?
I'm thrilled. Can't you hear it in my voice?
That's about as excited as I've ever known you ever in my life. So that's on a Dan scale of excitement. That's certainly, pegging an 8.5, I think.
I always aim to please.
All right. And, of course, the one, the only, Buzz Carrick, founder and editor of ThirdDegree.net and from the Dallas Morning News. Come in, Buzz.
Hello, fellas. I'm calling in from Amsterdam, where I'm completing the transfer of Paxton Pomykal to Ajax.
Oh, that's happened already? It only really just the same day this whole thing starts, the hype machine starts.
Yep.
And
we're finalizing the deal right now.
You're the actual transaction guy. Good. Yep. Well, congratulations. Yep. I hope you get an agent fee.
Yeah, I'm Pomakal's new agent. 10%. I'm in.
Well, congratulations on negotiating that deal so quickly. That's I wish all soccer transactions went as fast to that. All right, so
another window's closed. We're doing the deal.
All right. Well, hurry up and get on Thomas Roberts to Germany. So we can just sell them all. So let's start there, and because we'll start with the LA game because I believe that's where the Paxton Pomykal hype train started, as he got the start over Ja'Cory Hayes due to injury, and Dallas goes on to win over an absolutely terrible LA Galaxy team, which makes me wonder how much we should dial back the excitement level. 2-0 on Saturday. Buzz, is everybody's excitement level justified from the performance?
Paxton specifically or FC Dallas collectively?
I think those are two very different conversations, so let's start with the team in general, and we'll drill down to Paxton later on.
Sure. The team collectively, I think you have to be pretty happy with the performance. I wrote early in the week about how collectively great the three midfielders were together. They were fantastic. Every single one of them played at a really, really high level. The front line, maybe still a work in progress. We got to get Baji running a higher line. He's checking back too much, although Michael Barrios is doing a nice job of recognizing that play and getting in behind him. I mean, how many times you see that happen should tell you how many times Baji checked back. Mascaro's a little bit in and out of the game. I mean, as a collective front line, you'd like to see more than 12 shots at home when you dominate with a 64% possession. 12 is not enough. 4 on goal is not terrible out of 12, but you want to see that at more like 20, I think. So that needs a little work. Final third needs a little work. And then the defense was okay, but there were also a couple of moments where they let LA get a little something going and counter little letdowns, where LA was able to hit the crossbar or get they didn't have a lot of great scoring chances, but they were all mostly a little further out. But, just some letdowns, some little bit of moments of not the intensity you want to see. So overall, a pretty good performance, one you have to be pretty happy about. But as we talked about, this LA team is not very good, not right now. They're missing too many pieces. Their back line they're trying to rebuild it. It's still not great. So between New England and LA, you've played two of the not-so-great teams right now in the league. So we want to tap the brakes a little bit on our excitement early in the season.
Dan, I'm counting on you to come to us with a fresh, interesting perspective on the 2-0 win. So give it to me.
I think everything that Buzz just said. Sort of come to Buzz's point of LA getting a couple of attacks away. Last week we didn't see the Ryan Hollingshead dilemma, I guess you call it, weighing up his attacking strengths for his defensive frailties. And I think that, against LA, you kind of saw both sides of that. He was getting forward at the same time in the first half. There was a lot coming down that side of the field. Felcher had the shot on the crossbar. That's going to be Hollinshead marking him. Who had the shot? Was it Leggett had that little chipped shot? It should have been called a foul for a foul that was committed on Reto Ziegler, but the ref let it go. Again, that's where you expect Hollinshead to be. You don't expect Ziegler to be stepping that far outside to cover.
So are you giving a poor grade to Ryan's performance, or a...
It was more what we used to. It definitely brings in, and as Buzz alluded to in his breakdown, the battle at left back's on. We've seen Pedroso come back. We've seen him play, step in and play all right. Particularly if Cannon is injured, you can expect to see Hollinshead slide over. If not, well, you've got two good options who give very different sides to their game.
Yeah, Pedroso and Hollingshead are very, very different players, and I thought Hollingshead played better in Game 2 than in Game 1, and certainly showed his utility level and usefulness by switching over when Reggie got hurt. So do we have any word so far as to what Reggie's status is for Saturday?
I checked around a little bit, but other than the early report from John Arnold showed up on our blog in the morning news. It's not part of our blog, but it shows up there. It's sort of being day-to-day with Reggie. And today he popped up on the MLS injury report under the questionable, which, of course, is day-to-day. So, it's not bad enough that he's out. So that's a really positive sign. If I had to guess, I'd be conservative and not play him this week, just because if you put him in and then it's not good, then you got to burn a sub. So I'm expecting him to not play, but that's just based on the idea that he's day to day and the idea that you might not want to do something risky on the road against a relatively decent team in Columbus.
Yeah, we'll get to Columbus in a second, but the injury to Cannon did highlight a concern that we had at the beginning of the season, which was the bit of lack of depth at right back in particular. Are we comfortable with Ryan Hollingshead playing that position for, let's say Reggie's injury is worse than we think, and it's a real, a grade 2 ankle sprain, and he's out 4 to 6 weeks?
Well, I certainly think Lucci is. He mentioned that to me in discussing Ryan in the preseason. We were discussing Ryan versus Pedroso and how in the long run, potentially your guy Pedroso would be a pretty good player at that left back spot. And Lucci said, without giving anything away, said, well, if that were to happen, Ryan can also play right back, so that gives us great cover. So in his mind, Ryan is perfectly acceptable on both wings. And the interesting question will be, if Ryan does have to play over there, that'll give Pedroso a whole game and a good leg and a good position, and it might be hard to get him out at that point.
I'll give this question to either one of you. Am I wrong? Again, this was another game I had to watch on television, which obviously limits my ability to really analyze it very well. But my sense is I was a little concerned that I thought I saw Santiago Mosquera and Paxton running into each other several times deep in kind of in the middle third of the field, when I really feel like what I should be seeing is Santiago out wide and high left or high right, whatever side he's playing on at that moment. And I got the sense that Santiago isn't doing that enough, and I'm wondering, is that by design, or is that by his showing his frustration that he's not getting enough of the ball?
Well, I think from the left wing that Mosquera is coming in too much. I mean, after you and I talked about that, I went and looked at his charts, and he's definitely playing sort of all across the front and definitely playing into the middle more than he should. He needs to set up left more. But some of that too is Paxton's very aggressive about his movements too. He can play wing, so he likes to go out there as well. And with the other two guys being slightly more defensive-minded, Paxton is on basically walkabout. He ends up all over the place. So you're going to get some of that when you have two guys that are trying to figure each other out. And I'm sure that they worked on that in training, or at least in the tape room. I'm sure Lucci would have covered that with those guys. So I don't think that's anything more than early in the season, early in this grouping with Paxton having now changed from Haynes, trying to find out where everybody is. I mean, you do want those guys popping into the middle, into that hole, but just not camping out in there, as much as Mosquera has been, which is too much.
I think you've also got an issue where, Lucci had said about a true 10, Mosquera was kind of like the de facto playmaker. If the ball's not coming that way, down the left, the playmaker is going to kind of gravitate towards the ball. And also that 4-3-3 is kind of a little more compact. It does play a little more narrow. So there's probably an adjustment there that Mosquera is going to have to try and, like Reggie last year, when do you go, when do you stay? When do you come, how far do you come inside, and when do you kind of get back out?
Was anybody else surprised that Aranguiz was the last sub in the game instead of Cervania or somebody more defensive-minded?
I was surprised, but then I have a theory about that. My theory is that in garbage time, that sub was an attempt to get Aranguiz engaged mentally. We talked last week, Dan and I both did, about his body language in practice, and his just sort of going through the motions. So why not throw him on at the end of the game and make him feel like he's part of the team? That was my take sitting in the stands, because I was scratching my head just like you were.
And that's an interesting new haircut he has, by the way. I noticed that on the TV as well.
The blondie, maybe he thinks blonde guys get to play looking at Paxton, so I'm gonna go blonde.
All right, so since we have talked a little bit about it, man, Paxton really did put on the performance that so many of us have been wanting. He appears to be the midfielder who's not afraid to grab the ball and start going at defenders. He's so fleet of foot and got a high skill. It was such a nice performance, and obviously his effort and part in the goal, which should arguably be goal of the week from Brian Acosta. What an absolutely perfect skill level and level of skill to hit the ball in the manner that he did. But it really doesn't start unless Paxton's putting in his effort and doing his thing. And then, of course, that today resulted in the much-discussed article in Marca, which is, the Spanish newspaper, football magazine newspaper, where Alberto Rubio goes on an absolutely unbelievable lengths to praise Paxton Pomykal, who he makes a comparison to Frankie de Jong, the Ajax player who has cut a deal to go to Barcelona. He literally calls him a twin. And obviously he's not, but makes comparisons into skill levels and why they, how they carry the ball with each other. And he just goes on and on praising, which spun up an immediate amount of hype on Paxton today. And as we tweeted, you can really, your mileage may vary into the accuracy of his praise and how much of this is just him being a little overexcited and how legitimate it is. But, man, that certainly is the type of article that starts a serious hype machine on a young player on a global level.
Well, we already talked this spring about how we thought the team was thrusting him, FC Dallas was thrusting him out into the limelight maybe a little too early and putting all this pressure on him, and then he didn't start opening day. Look, you and I have been talking about Paxton since he was 15. There's no doubt that the kid's talented. I don't quite think that he's running Ajax talented, but I think he's certainly quite talented. And this performance that we saw from him is 100% prototypical, the exact performance that you would have seen from Paxton in any game you watched him play, whether it be the Dallas Cup, whether it be in the Academy playoffs, whatever it would be. This is exactly what you get, an exceedingly high engine, exceedingly high work rate, tons and tons of range, covering the whole middle part of the field, plays defense. We've seen him play as a 6. We've seen him play as an 8, a 10, wings. The guy can do anything in the midfield. So we certainly love this kid as a player, but I think people are getting ahead of themselves. It is just one game now that he's started in Major League Soccer. It's exciting. But as we just talked about, LA is not the greatest team in the world, and in particular, their defense isn't great. So as much as I want to be hyped about Paxton, and much as I think hometown fans should be excited to watch him grow into this team and grow hopefully as a starter. And like, what could he do in a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road as he takes over this team? I think this will become his team. I think this idea that like, let's sell him to Ajax for $10 million is just absurd. It's like, it is one game. Slow down. Love watching him play day to day for this team. And let's be excited about that. That's exciting.
Can I be the wet blanket?
Yeah, go for it.
I expect nothing less.
So first, the assist, 99 times out of 100, that ball is played by another player onto the penalty spot, and Barrios doesn't win a header. It gets swatted away. No one thinks anything more of it. The fact that Paxton had the wherewithal to look over his shoulder and pick out Acosta's run from pretty deep when you're in that position.
Untracked, mind you. Someone should be tracking him against a better team.
Well,
that too.
It was so just the fact that he was able, look and recognize that run, and then play that pass, from close to the byline. That should be applauded. That, the assist was honestly as good as the goal itself. The wet blanket part is Marca is, it's a really low-level tabloid. It's Real Madrid propaganda. And unfortunately, one of the things they do is they hype up young players to get Real Madrid fans excited when things are going wrong, which, they have been going wrong lately. And especially after the Vinicius Jr. Transfer kind of bombed, the big thing right now in Europe is, oh, look, we can get cheap players from America. So kind of picking that hype out, there may not be a ton of depth to it for why they actually wrote about that, why they wrote about Paxton in particular. If an Andrew Carlton or someone has a good game, I'd kind of expect to see the same thing in the same sort of circumstance.
There's really two different conversations at play here. One is the Marca article and how it can, whether for better or worse, right or wrong, start a hype machine. That whether you agree with it or not, that obviously has already happened. But two, to Buzz's point, is article or no article, there already was a bunch of ancillary American soccer media hype in the days after the game, where people were really falling over themselves to act like they had never, that nobody had ever talked about how good Paxton was before, and suddenly now, hey, look, Paxton can also play defense. Who knew? So
100%. I mean, you look at a lot of people say, oh, a European publication is suddenly talking about an American player, he must be the next great thing. It's it's going to be a natural reaction.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's be clear that all of us have been hyped about Paxton for years. I remember you calling him in the Dallas Cup like 3 years ago, one of the best Americans you've ever seen, young Americans you've ever seen, and I totally agree with that in the sense that like he's one of the top 10 players to ever come out of this FC Dallas Academy. Like, we should be hyped as a FC Dallas followers and fans that this kid is on the verge of becoming the guy, at least on the verge of becoming a starter, and we hopefully is going to be the guy here. That's exciting. That growth from I've just played my first game to now I'm a constant starter, which is what Reggie just did, and now I'm going to become the guy that's going to run the thing. That's exciting. That's what I want to be hyped about, because that's, he was, as you mentioned, the perfect change next to Acosta and Grezzo. He has that little burst, that little extra something. No offense to Ja'Cory Hayes, but that was missing in the first game, and it really was exciting to see him bring that.
Yeah, we just don't see a lot of, Diaz may have been the last guy that we ever saw that was willing to grab a ball in midfield and actually, advance it forward into a final third. You just don't see that a lot, especially from an American player. I also should qualify something. The only reason why I ever became aware early of Paxton was because of my co-host on the Kick Around, Andy Swift, who's also the executive director of the Dallas Cup, who was the chaperone of the All-Star team they took to Europe several years ago, back when Paxton was still, I think, 15 years old, and Paxton played in an all-star game and was the MVP of the tournament, and then got to play on an all-star team with Zico was the coach, and he scored a bunch of goals in that game. So that's how I became aware of Paxton. But it was because Andy pointed him out to me, and then suddenly I saw him play in some other games, that it just became obvious the guy was several levels above everybody else he was playing with.
We saw him replicate those performances in the Dallas Cup this last year, up until he got hurt. He was playing in multiple different positions for the team against Arsenal, against other great Red Bull Brazil, other great teams, and looking like a heck of a competitor. He's going to end up being the guy that we point to as the poster child, hopefully not in a super negative way, for the missing U23 team that they now have. He really could have used that team the last 2 seasons to play in. Thankfully, I don't think it's going to affect him a great deal, other than it would have been super good for his development, and maybe we would have seen him a little bit quicker into the team. But I mean, right now he's poised to get a really good run, and that's exciting.
Yeah, well, the North Texas Soccer Club will really benefit somebody like Thomas Roberts, assuming he's here longer past his 18th birthday. Which, again, by the way, the countdown clock is on. His birthday is May 11th. What I really want to kind of focus on, though, is your point, Buzz, about everybody just needs to tap the brakes a little bit and stop worrying about how quickly and for how much this team can sell Paxton for, and why can't we just enjoy him as the attacking key element of this club, at least for a little bit of time?
Yeah, this club has talked about, and they literally have said this, that they want to be Ajax, right? They want to win titles while they sell players. Well, that means you've got to keep some of them. You got to keep them until you can run them in your team for a couple of years. And right before Oscar and his guys left, I was talking to one of those people, and I won't put him on record. I won't say which one it was. But we were watching Paxton play. We were watching Cervania play. And he said to me, boy, this team is going to have a really good midfield in 2 or 3 seasons. It is really exciting. And that's the way they were looking at those guys. They're looking at Cervania. They're looking at Paxton. They're looking at Cirillo, looking at Arangis. Like, there is some serious talent coming through the pipe. And it's going to be a lot of fun to watch it develop and play here. Not everything needs to be about what can I get for them today. I would have preferred to keep Richards here and let him play his way into this team and then sell him. But, that's not – sometimes you got to sell them when they're hot, I guess. But hopefully that's not the case with Paxton. Hopefully we get to – I mean, I don't want to speak for him. Maybe he wants to go. But I would love to see him develop into the guy here and run this team and run this franchise for 3 or 4 seasons.
Dan, I wonder, growing up in England, was it common or did you find similar attitudes and excitement levels about young players playing for small, lower, or non-league teams getting attraction from Premiership or First Division teams, and everybody willing to sell them on as quickly as possible? Or was it similar that way there?
It was definitely. The Premier League actually passed, kind of forced the FA to pass a rule that basically said they could cherry pick anyone outside the Premier League's best young players. So it doesn't really happen as much now, but I mean that's how Luton Town have stayed in business. Crewe Alexandra. A more recent example would be from Crewe would have been Nick Powell when he was signed by United, or when Gareth Bale or Theo Walcott came through Southampton while they were in the Championship. It is a very exciting thing, and people do jump on a hype train. Sometimes it pans out like Bale or Rooney or someone like that, and sometimes it goes like Nick Powell.
The other point I want to make before we move on to previewing the Columbus game is I don't know if anybody else noticed that entire sequence with Paxton and Acosta actually begins because Badji completely misreads a square ball from the right and overruns a perfectly squared ball at the top of the box, and he overruns it, which Paxton actually has the wherewithal to identify and chase down as it runs past Badji, who, again, I just don't get it. I don't see it. And I still am worried that position is what's going to end up hurting this team long term over the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, based on the way he's playing right now, that absolutely is the weakest link in the team. Based on the way he was playing in the spring, that's not the case. So, if Baji can find the confidence and he can get on a couple and he can start banging in goals, I mean, what we talk about him hoping he'll score 10. Well, that's 1 every 3 games. That's not a very good rate. I mean, a good striker is 1 every 2, right? So that's when you're talking about 15 to 20 goals in this league, not 10. So it's, we don't have the high expectations in the world for him, and we expect other people to score, which so far they're doing in 2 games. But, it definitely is the weak spot in the field. If this was the middle of the season, right now, I think Ferreira would have done enough in these 2 games to get a start. I don't think at the beginning of the season that's going to happen, because a guy like Baji, who's been the guy all spring, deserves maybe a 5 or 6 game run at the start of the season before you start talking about replacing him. But Jesus Ferreira is playing fantastically. He's got to be close to being in the mind of the gaffer, in the mind of Lucci, to be thinking, maybe I'll get him in there for a game and see how it goes. But I think you got to give Baji a few more at the start of the year. I mean,
all right,
2 games is a lot, not much.
Yeah, so let's at least address this, because I'm sure people listening to the podcast are wondering this question, at least in a high percentage, of what is the status of Cobra, who I still don't know the answer to this question. Did he play in the North Texas game afterwards or not? And is there any truth to the reports we saw from some readers that said that he's telling people he's injured?
Well, apparently he's told somebody he's injured. He did not play in the second North Texas game. He played in the first one. He didn't play in the second one. So I don't know. I mean, for me, the bottom line is just he's not good enough. But, maybe he's being limited in his mobility from the injury. I mean, if that's true, okay. He's not on the injured list. He's not showing up as being hurt. He's not doing rehab assignments. He's just training. So I don't know that I buy that. I mean, maybe. I guess we could hope that's the case. I mean, you'd hate to think that he's just not good enough is depressing.
All right.
So right now, he's getting beaten out by an 18-year-old kid.
All right, Dan, I'm just wondering, as you've been digging around in your soccer dark web circles, if you've read anything that may give us some evidence as to what really is going on with the Cobra.
Not even sure what that would imply. Soccer dark web circles. No.
Just think,
really know the same as you.
Just think the MLS Reddit subpage times 100. That's what I imagine you float around in on the interwebs.
So the comment section of every MLS article I write is what you're saying.
Exactly. All right, so the Troops take their first road game this week, and they have to go to Columbus, who have the same record. But I think that it's fair to say that they're floating at a higher level right now. They started the season on the road, tying the Red Bulls 1-1 in New Jersey, and then they came back to Columbus and faced the same New England Revolution that Dallas tied at home and beat them 2-0. This is going to be a much different and more telling test for the Huntsmen this weekend, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Columbus is a fairly well-coached team. They're certainly outstanding defensive team. At least they were under Berhalter. And I can't imagine that has changed all that much under their new coach. So this is going to be a pretty solid, pretty veteran, pretty experienced team. And they got a guy up front who does score. So this is a big test on the road in MLS against a team that's as good as the Crew is. This is a different caliber of opponent than the teams they've played to this point, for sure.
Yeah, you haven't faced anyone so far with even a decent attacker present. I mean, Teal Bunbury's kind of your best so far, and not that good. Facing Zardes and Higuain, it's going to be a pretty tall order. Columbus are unbeaten in their last 9 at home. Granted, 8 of those were with Berhalter and not Porter, but we know what Caleb Porter can do on a good day.
I don't know if anybody's watched enough of the Crew yet so far, but my sense is that Porter's playing with a pair of holding mids. They're playing more of a kind of a 4-2-3-1, and I wonder if that 5-man midfield is going to pose problems for Dallas. With only 3 in the midfield, and are they going to be fast enough to and be able to pass out of the back to find the 3 guys in the front? I really wonder if the Lucci's 4-3-3 is really going to be put to the test here.
It probably depends on how high their wings are playing. If their 2 wings are sort of deeper, with Trapp and whoever else is in the middle there. Then you're looking at like a flatter kind of shape, and then it really is kind of an overload. But if you're looking at if it's more like the way Dallas plays, where the high wings are up on the side of Zardes, and Higuain is playing as a 10, he's getting up into that hole a lot, you might end up with Dallas having more numbers in the middle of the field. And that's one of Lucci's trademarks that we've written about for Lucci ball, is the way they overwhelm people with numbers. The whole thing is fluid and shifting. So the idea is to always get more numbers. So it's going to be interesting to watch how that midfield plays out. It's not necessarily super even. I mean, Dallas is a high possession team this year. We've seen that clearly. They're, over 62% on the season, and Columbus is under 60%. They're more down like 58% of the season. So will that hold up on the road? Both teams kind of like to possess it. So it's going to be a battle of 2 teams trying to possess it. Could be interesting. It would be a little more of a chess match, maybe a little more slower paced game, because this is not a countering Dallas team. Columbus sure isn't a countering team, not fast anyway. So it'll be interesting.
It'd be interesting to see, which Columbus kind of shows up. They haven't really cemented their identity under Porter yet. I think when they played the Red Bulls, they played more like it was more of a high 4-1-4-1. Against New England, they won 2-1. I mean, they just like Dallas, they got bogged back by New England packing the midfield up. And when you go back and look at average position and everything, they only ever had Zardes was ever so slightly in the New England half. Other than that, everyone was kind of very central, very reserved. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how Porter intends to react to the 4-3-3.
We're looking at a windy day, sunny in the 40s in Columbus, so weather other than the wind may not be too much of an issue. I'm going to suspect, Buzz, that your anticipation is a lineup that is without Reggie. I think it's fair to say it's unlikely Reggie starts, but everything else will probably remain the same as it started against LA, right?
Well, my assumption is that, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, that when you're going to go on the road at Columbus, if you play a guy who's questionable, if 20 minutes into the game he pulls up, then I got to burn a sub on the road 20 minutes into the game. So that's what you don't want to. That's what you want to avoid. So my guess is that they'll hold Reggie out for this game, in which case Hollingshead goes to right back and Pedroso comes on at left back. Other than that, I can't imagine you changing anything yet. Like I said, I don't think it's time to pull Baji yet. I think otherwise it'll be exactly the same as it was last game. Even if Hayes was healthy, which I don't think he officially is, he's officially still listed as out for what that's worth. So I don't know why when you play as good as you get against LA, even though we've talked about how they're not the greatest team in the world, you still don't change anything when you play that good other than what you're forced to change, which is, I think, Reggie to be conservative on the road against a pretty good team.
And just to preview a little bit, and we'll obviously talk a lot more about this next week, but and not to look past the Columbus game, but things transpired this week that actually make the following game, the home game against Colorado, seem really interesting, simply because Dallas has an interesting situation in that they got a bunch of call-ups that may force Lucci to throw out a really insanely young starting lineup on the 23rd against the Rapids.
Well, Acosta got called up for sure. Not for sure. Sorry. Grezzo got called up for sure. Acosta, we assume, is going to get called up any minute. I can't imagine he's not getting called up, which leaves you a little depleted. Now, the good news today was that Paxton, Cervania, and Ferreira all got left out of the March U20 camp. Now, My guess is that was maybe a holdback from Dallas, or because this camp isn't the we're going to the World Cup camp. This is like the camp before that. So it's kind of a couple of guys that Ramos hasn't had yet. And certainly you wouldn't think that Paxton and Cervania would go from starting the U20 Worlds with Cervania being best 11 and Paxton arguably could have been in there too. You don't go from that to out of the squad. I mean, you might go from that to depth maybe, but you wouldn't go out of the squad. So anyway, those guys are staying, which will help keep Paxton in there. But you're definitely going to be missing Grezzo for sure, and you're 95% going to miss Acosta. So you're looking at Cervania and Cirillo in there with Paxton against Colorado. That's going to be fun.
We saw that Thomas Roberts traveled with the team to Columbus. Is there any chance or hope that he actually gets time this weekend? Potentially, is maybe trying to get his feet wet for more time against Colorado because of the missing pieces.
Maybe they always travel 19 though. They always take that extra guy and just in case, and that might be the case whether Reggie traveled or not. We don't know. Not Paxton. Excuse me. Roberts has been the 19th guy at home the first two games. I think it was both games. I have to actually check that now that I say that. So he might be that guy, or maybe you're right. I'd love to see him get some minutes. I think that's why they put Cirillo in the other day, and maybe it's a good idea to get Cervania and Roberts both into this game if you can, just with the idea that you're going to be missing two of your starting midfielders in the next game. So that's a really good question. And unfortunately, the only way to know the answer is to see what they do.
Well, yep. Look at me. I'm already past the whole Paxton hype and ready to rev up the Thomas Robert hype machine.
Well, you don't need a hype machine for that kid. He's legit. But he's not even where Paxton is. The kid's not even played a game yet. I mean, Paxton's way more experienced than Thomas Roberts.
I know, but you have said, I think even on this podcast, that you think he actually has the higher upside of the two players long term.
He does, but he's 2-3 years younger.
Yeah.
So, if you're talking about winning a game next week, it's Paxton all the way. 10 years from now, I think Roberts will be the guy that's been in Europe the whole time. But that's just my opinion watching him play. That doesn't mean that actually is going to happen, of course.
Okay, some other notes. I, by pure coincidence, got a couple of reports that an incident happened in the warm-ups prior to the LA game. As we all know, nowadays, Dallas warms up against the Hall of Fame end of the stadium, the south side, where the blue seats are. And the story I've been told by a couple of people is that there were fans behind the goal, and the team was taking practice shots, and somebody lasered a shot into the stands, and a young girl, approximately 11 to 13-year-old, stuck her arms out to block the shot before it hit her in the head. And apparently the shot was so hit with such force and just perfectly against her arm that it snapped her arm. And they had to call an ambulance down and take her out. I've not gotten any kind of response from the club about this. I'm wondering if anybody that's listening to the podcast witnessed it themselves, or even better yet, knows the family. We'd love to get an update on her condition and what transpired there, because I've never heard that happening. Somebody getting injured at a soccer game, getting hit by a ball like that. And it's an interesting side story that I'd love to get more on. If anybody listening to the podcast can DM me or Buzz. The other big story that happened today that I just couldn't stop laughing at because of the photos that resulted for it was the way too obvious and way too hilarious and very embarrassing result of what is happening with Inter Miami announcing that they are going to rebuild on the Lockhart site to quote-unquote play a couple of years at the old Fusion Miami Fusion location until they can get their building and stadium situation settled and put up in Miami proper. Is there any chance whatsoever that David Beckham's team is actually playing in Miami proper anywhere before the year 2025?
They've talked about how this is going to be their academy, and they're going to put a USL or some kind of development team in this facility long run. So it's a multi-stage kind of project, and that's a great venue, and it'll be a great facility for them, for their academy and for their training center and all that stuff. The hard part for Beckham, and we should have always known this. I certainly have been saying this, that it's going to be really, really difficult for him to get something built in Miami. It just is. That's not an easy market to get all the local players together in. I certainly, for the sake of the league, I hope he can get it done. I don't think Fort Lauderdale's great long term for that franchise. That's not Inter Miami. That's not what Beckham's selling. So hopefully he can get it done. I don't think 2020. I think it's before 2025.
Well, they don't start playing until 2020, and I can't foresee them getting a deal negotiated and something built out that quickly in Miami. But you know what? I'll let the official Brit of the podcast decipher the look on David Beckham's face while he stood in front of what appeared to be a facility that actually looks worse than Moss Park, which is the old Lockhart Stadium.
So you're saying that wasn't the trailer for the new Jumanji movie?
It's not the spin-off from The Walking Dead home base. No, that is the old great Lockhart Stadium.
There's two things that Bex can console himself about. He'll have a stadium before New York City FC, and he'll have a stadium before the New England Revolution.
All right, Buzz, I'm going to let you get back to finalizing and crossing the T's and dotting the I's on your Paxton Pomykal to Ajax sale that you have negotiated and and executed. And Dan, I'm going to let you get back to your fluffy cat, Cinder.
Thank you.
Low-key Dan, my favorite thing about the pod. All right, everybody, thanks for listening, and we will talk to you next week on Third Degree, the podcast.